The auction ring smells of dust and diesel, and the men along the rail are laughing. A girl of 19, boots caked in Ozark clay, is loading 30 bony goats into a borrowed trailer, animals so thin and ribby that nobody else raised a hand to bid. A big cattleman calls out that the girl is collecting junk, and the co-op man laughs along with him. She does not answer. She just latches the gate and drives home to a farm the bank is already circling, where cedar and thorn brush have swallowed the back pastures her father cleared before he died. Behind her seat rides a worn stockman's notebook, and one line in it is underlined twice in her grandfather's hand. Within a single summer, those same 30 animals will do what no tractor, no hired crew, and no jug of herbicide ever managed on that choked land, and the same men laughing at the rail will drive out to see it with their own eyes. There are sick nights, a torn fence in the dark, and a fire season that decides who was right.
Stay to the end, because the last thing you learn about those goats is the part nobody in that county saw coming. Here is the thing most people get wrong about a goat. A cow is a grazer. It drops its head to the ground and shears off grass, and it wants nothing to do with a thorn bush. A goat is a browser. It lifts its head, it reaches up into the tangle a cow walks around, and it goes straight for the woody stuff that ranchers curse: cedar and juniper seedlings, blackberry canes, the arching whips of multiflora rose. What poisons a pasture for cattle is a plate of supper for a goat. Picture a hedge left alone for 10 years. The top grows so thick that no light reaches the floor beneath it, and every blade of grass down there starves in the shade. That closed roof is what foresters call a canopy. And once woody brush shuts it, grass and rain both stop reaching the soil. A dozer rips the whole thing out and leaves bare dirt that erodes by the first hard storm. A jug of herbicide kills the leaves and salts the ground for a season. Neither one teaches the land anything. Now turn 30 hungry goats into that same tangle behind a single strand of movable wire. They strip the low leaves first. They stand on their hind legs and peel bark off the young cedar until it girdles and dies. They chew the rose canes down to knuckles. Day by day the roof opens, light falls to the floor, and the old grass seed that has waited in that soil for years wakes up and comes green again. The trick is the wire. Bunch them tight on a small patch, let them hammer it hard for a few days, then move them on before they touch the recovering grass. Graze, rest, return. That is the whole engine. There is a bonus nobody advertises. Every dead cedar and dry blackberry cane in an overgrown pasture is fuel. Strip the brush, and you strip the ladder a wildfire climbs. A goat eating its way across a hillside is quietly lowering the odds that hillside ever burns. It costs about $40 a month in wire and salt against thousands for a machine. And it works while you sleep. On a summer morning, you can stand at a fence and watch the line where they finished yesterday. On one side, a wall of green thorn, and one step past it, bare stems catching the light, and grass already pushing up through the trampled ground. The farm sits on the wooded edge of Shannon County, Missouri, where the Current River fog burns off late and the ridges climb dark with cedar. Her name is Delia Hollis, and to understand the goats, you have to go back 40 years, to the man who first wrote in the notebook riding behind her seat. Elias Hollis ran a small herd of Spanish goats on these ridges from the 1960s on, and he kept every season in a stockman's ledger. Dates, weights, the weather, which brush the animals hit first. When Delia was small, he would set her on the tailgate and read the pages out loud, like scripture. He told her once, "The land talks in what grows on it. You just have to learn the words.
Her father, Wade Hollis, took the place over and tried to beat the brush the modern way, with a rented dozer and drums of spray. For a few good years, the back pastures ran green and the cattle grew fat. Then, a truck crossed the center line on the county road 2 winters ago, and Wade was gone before the ambulance reached the highway. The cedar came back the way it always does, quiet and patient, one seedling at a time, until the ground Wade had opened stood in walls of green thorn again. The cattle went one by one to cover the note. By the spring, Delia turned 19. The bank over in Winona had mailed its second letter, and there was more brush than grass on the whole 40 acres of Hollis ground. She had not opened her grandfather's ledger since the funeral. One cold night, she pulled it down from the shelf above the wood stove and turned to the page he had marked long ago with a strip of red baling twine. The line there was underlined twice, pressed so hard the pencil had torn clean through the paper. She read it once. She sat still. She read it again. Then she reached for her coat and the keys to the borrowed trailer and started for the door before the fear in her chest could talk her back into the chair. By the time the small stock came through the ring at the Winona sale barn, most of the buyers had already gone home. What was left in the pen looked like a mistake. 30 goats, dull-coated and hip-boned, a mix of Spanish and Kiko blood run down through years of nobody caring. One doe limped. 2 of the kids coughed. The auctioneer barely slowed his chant for them, because a goat you cannot fatten and cannot show is a goat nobody drives home. Delia Hollis stood at the back with the notebook zipped inside her jacket. When the lot came up, she lifted one finger. Roy Tibbetts, who ran 400 of cattle east of town and liked an audience, turned on his stool and grinned. "The girl's collecting junk goats," he said, loud enough for the whole rail. Lyle Grider from the co-op laughed the way men laugh when the biggest man laughs first. Somebody asked whether she meant to milk them or bury them. She did not look up. She had a number in her head, a small one, and she stopped the moment it was reached. $2 a head over the packer price, and the lot was hers. 30 animals for less than she had spent on the trailer's diesel. Loading them took the better part of an hour. They balked at the chute and doubled back and stepped on her boots, and she moved them one at a time with a flat hand on a bony shoulder, the way the ledger said to work a nervous animal. Nobody offered to help. Roy Tibbetts watched from his truck window and told Grider those things would be dead or scattered by August. She drove the ridge road home in the last light and backed up to the old pen her father had built for weaning calves. When the gate dropped, the goats spilled out and stood blinking, ribs sharp under thin hide. And then they turned as one for the wall of green along the fence. They walked past the hay she had forked out. They went for the brush, blackberry cane and cedar tip, the tough, woody stuff cattle will stand and starve beside. That was the thing the men at the rail never troubled to learn. A cow pulls almost every bite it takes from grass, while a browsing goat will draw more than half its daily feed from the very woody brush the whole county was paying dozers and chemicals to kill. Think of a hardy brush plant the way you would think of a household living off a full pantry. A blackberry cane or a young cedar keeps its savings underground, in the roots, packed away as sugar and starch through the winter. In spring, the plant spends that savings to push out new leaves, betting it can earn the store back before frost. Cut it once, and it shrugs, dips into the pantry, and grows the leaves again. That is why a single pass of a mower or one hard chewing does almost nothing. The roots are still rich, and the plant simply reopens for business. Here is where timing does the work a machine never can. Wait until the plant has emptied most of its pantry into a fresh flush of green. Then take that green away. Now it must reach back into a store that is nearly bare and spend again.
Do it a second time, and a third, hitting the same plant each time it leafs out, and the roots run down to nothing. No poison, no diesel. You simply keep the plant from ever paying itself back until it quietly gives up. The old ledger called it working the brush when it was tired, and its pages were full of dates marking when each kind of woody growth stood weakest. There is a second gift most people never notice.
A mature eastern red cedar is a thirsty thing. One tree can pull dozens of gallons of water out of the ground on a hot day and breathe it off through its needles, water that would otherwise feed the grass and keep a low spring trickling. Clear a hillside of that crowding cedar and the soil holds more moisture. The seep at the bottom of the draw comes back to life, and grass drinks what the trees had been stealing. So the animals were never only hungry mouths. They were a slow, patient tool for reading which plant was starving the soil, which one was drinking the hill dry, and when to strike so it could not recover. Which leaves one question hanging over the whole thing. If the method was that old, that cheap, and that sure, why had every neighbor with a checkbook spent years fighting the same brush and losing? The trouble came on a wet morning in early June, before Delia Hollis had worked 2 full weeks with the herd. A young doe stood off from the others along the fence line, head hung low, a thread of foam at her lips, her sides pumping fast. By the time Delia crossed the lot, the animal had gone down in the mud. She was dead before the fog lifted, and 2 more stood dull-eyed by the trough that evening. She walked the pen on her knees until she found it. A limb of wild cherry snapped off in the last storm, its leaves gone soft and gray at the edges. Her grandfather had set the warning down years back in that tight hand. Wilted cherry leaf turns to poison as it dies, and a hungry goat will strip it before anyone knows the branch is down. She burned every fallen limb she could find and moved the herd to clean ground. Then the dark took its turn. A little after 2 one August night, she woke to the goats screaming. She ran out barefoot with a flashlight and found the woven wire torn open at the low corner, a coyote slipping back into the cedar, and the herd scattered across 3 ridges.
It took her and a borrowed dog 2 days to gather them. She came up 4 short. She was mending the wire, hands raw, when a truck slowed on the ridge road. An old man leaned out from under a feed store cap. His name was Otis Renfro, 40 years with the range program before his knees gave out.
"You're stringing that too loose," he said. "And you graze one lot till it's dirt. Split it. Move them every 3 days. Fright and worms both travel in a crowd."
She looked at the ledger open on the tailgate, then back at him. "My grandfather wrote nearly the same words," she said. Otis came back the next morning with a roll of high-tensile wire and a battery fencer. Through the rest of the month, they cut the big lot into 4 small paddocks and ran the herd through them, 3 days on each. The scours cleared, the does filled out. The blackberry along the east fence stood in bare cane with thin grass greening between the stems.
One evening, loading his tools, Otis looked a long moment at the animals grazing tight and easy in the failing light, tugged his cap down, and drove off without another word. Smoke stood on the western horizon for 3 days before anyone in Shannon County would say the word out loud. It was the driest August in 11 years. The current river ran low and warm. The pastures went the color of old straw, and every draw was packed with cedar and dead blackberry cane baked to tinder. Roy Tibbetts had grazed his cattle down to bare dirt and was hauling water to them twice a day. Then a power line dropped east of Birch Tree, and the fire took the ridge road like it had been waiting for it. Delia Hollis was tightening a loose clip on the fencer when she saw the first orange line crown a cedar break 2 miles off. The wind came out of the southwest, hot and steady, driving a wall of gray smoke ahead of the flames. She heard it before she could see it plain. A low, tearing sound, like heavy canvas ripped slow. Trucks were already crawling the county road, mattresses and dog crates roped down in the beds, and a deputy leaned on his horn at the crossing. She did not run for the highway. She stood a moment and counted what the summer had bought her. 4 small paddocks cut into the back 40. A hillside she and Otis Renfro had opened up. Ground the herd had chewed down to short green and bare stem week after week until there was almost nothing left on it that would carry a flame. She reached for the notebook on the tailgate and found the line her grandfather had set down after the dry year of 1954, the one she had read until the ink went soft under her thumb. "Keep the fuel low," he had written, "and the fire finds nothing to eat." Then she looked at the goats, crowded and bawling along the north wire, and at the tree line where the smoke was climbing black now instead of gray. Otis slid in through the gate, gravel spitting under his tires. "They're closing the road in 20 minutes, he yelled over the wind. "Sheriff's turning everybody back. Where do you want them?" She was already moving for the far gate, wire cutters in one fist, the count running in her head. 30 head, 4 paddocks. One stripped hillside standing between her whole herd and the fire. She hauled the gate wide, filled her lungs, and stepped into the smoke. The fire ran itself out against Delia Hollis's south fence just after dark on the 3rd day. It came off the ridge, crowning through the cedar breaks, fast and hungry. Then it reached the ground she and Otis Renfro had chewed bare all summer and found nothing left to eat. It laid down in the short grass and the trampled stubble, smoldered, and died at the wire. When the smoke cleared, Shannon County woke to a strange map.
Better than 2,000 acres of black stretched from Birch Tree to the river. Fence posts standing like burnt matchsticks. Cedar skeletons still ticking with heat. And in the middle of it, sharp as a green thumbprint, sat the Hollis back 40. Short grass, open ground, a low seep running again at the bottom of the draw where the thirsty cedars used to crowd. 30 goats, ribs no longer showing, grazed easy in the one pasture the fire had refused. Roy Tibbets drove out 3 mornings later. He had lost a mile of fence and burned off half his grass, and his cattle were bawling in a dry lot. He climbed down slow at her gate, the same man who had leaned on the sale barn rail and called them junk goats. He looked a long time at the green. Then he took off his hat. "I'll pay whatever you ask," he said. "Bring them to my place when they've rested." By first frost, she had a waiting list. The co-op man who had laughed put her number up by the register. Ranchers from 3 counties hauled trailers to borrow the herd, and Delia moved them lot to lot, splitting the pay, filling the ledger her grandfather had kept. The bank quit circling. The back pastures came back to grass. She kept his line taped inside the notebook cover, the one she had read the night she stepped into the smoke. "Keep the fuel low, and the fire finds nothing to eat." Here is what the summer taught her, and it is worth carrying home. The thing everyone throws away is not always worthless. Sometimes it is only waiting on the one person patient enough to learn what it can do. If you have ever been handed something the world called useless and made it matter, tell us in the comments. And tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe, and we will be back next week with another.